1, 2, 3. Sing, we've come. We've come alive in the light of your saving grace. You saw our guilt, saw our shame, and you took our place. We will dance, we will sing, 'cause salvation's here. Jesus is here. Jesus is here. remain unchanged. God of all power, King of all glory, you do wonderful things. God of all creation, King of our salvation, you do wonderful things. You do wonderful things. Redeemer, you spoke salvation at the cross, at the cross. Oh Jesus, you're breathing life again in us, again in us. You're the same today as you were at the beginning. You remain unchanged. God of all power, King of all glory, you do wonderful things. God of all creation, King of our salvation, you do wonderful things. You do wonderful When you move in power, a miracle can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. You are here with us. Anything can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. Move in power, a miracle can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. You are here with us. Anything can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. Oh Lord, God of all power, King of all glory, you do wonderful things. God of all creation, King of our salvation, you do wonderful things. You do. When you move in power, a miracle can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. Oh Lord, you are here with us. Anything can happen. We believe you do wonderful. When you move in power, a miracle can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. You are here with us. Anything can happen. We believe you do wonderful things. 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 Oh Lord, God of all power, King of all glory, you do wonderful things. God of all creation, King of our salvation, you do wonderful things. You do wonderful things. salvaged me, for his love has set me free. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. And I shall wait upon the Lord. Oh, I shall wait upon his word, and by his grace I am released. By his grace I am redeemed. Oh, for God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. Whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. Oh Lord, our God. And by his precious blood I have been set free, for the glory of Jesus' name. Oh, I surrender all now to Christ alone. In Jesus I am saved. By his precious blood I have been set free, for the glory of Jesus' name. Oh, I surrender now to Christ alone. In Jesus I am saved. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whosoever believes will not perish, they shall have eternal life. Yes, they shall have eternal life. Yeah, they shall have eternal life.
Hi everyone, my name is Papa and I lead Gen Life. Gen Life is the young adults of Divergent Church across our gatherings in Canberra. If you're a young adult, we would love to have you involved and connected with us. Our next monthly event is coming up on the 22nd of August. Gen Life Trivia Night. Please register on the Eventbrite link so that we can have as many of you there as possible. Follow us on Facebook to keep up to date with all the rest of the monthly events we'll be having in 2020. Hope to see you there.
The coronavirus pandemic has not only significantly impacted our nation, but for those who have seen businesses fail, become unemployed, lost loved ones, encountered family conflict and suffered relationship breakdown, well, the tragedy is all too real. But for this reason, the acclaimed Empower program is currently being made available to churches throughout our nation, and for a limited time, free of charge. This 12-session program has been developed by experts in clinical psychology from a biblical worldview, combining the best of science and scripture. It's specifically designed to help people navigate this critical period and effectively recover from high-impact life events. Look, countless thousands of people have already benefited from this program, so if you're a church pastor, a school principal, or Christian organizational leader, can I implore you, sign up today and make it available to your congregation or community without delay.
Hello, Divergent Church. My name's Phil, and I'll be preaching the message to you today on identity. If you don't know me, my wife Terry and I were a part of Divergent Church in Canberra for 10 years. We've recently moved to Port Macquarie, 7 hours north, to plant a church and to foster. And in the last 3 weeks, we've just become a foster family. And we've welcomed into our house 2 new children to add to our 3 biological children. So we've welcomed into our house a 2-year-old girl and an 8-month-old boy. And one thing that struck us as we welcomed those children into our house, particularly with the girl, was her absolute desire to form an attachment with Terry. From the get-go, she called Terry Mum. And we would encourage her, and indeed we still do, to call her Auntie Terry or Mum Terry, because we know that her biological mum is out there, and there's still contact there. And indeed we hope for reunification one day. But this little girl just called Terry Mum all day and for most of the night. Mum, 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 mum. And it struck me that as human beings, we have this desire built into us. It's in our design to find parenthood, and not so much find where we come from, but to find out who we belong to. I think it's the case with all of us. I think the situation that this little girl is in is actually a metaphor for the human race, in that all of us are looking for our authentic selves, and to find that, we need to find unquestionable evidence of our origin. We want to be sons and daughters. We want to belong to people. Ultimately, we want to belong to God, and if we don't, we carry a void in us until we find God. In 1 John chapter 3 verse 1, it says, "The Father has loved us so much that we are called children of God." And as if to drive the point home, he says, and we really are his children. And the key text that I want to focus on today, Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 to 6 says, "But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son," that's Jesus, "born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, that we might receive adoption to sonship." And just pause for a moment here. The Greek word for adoption to sonship, the phrase adoption to sonship is a legal term referring to the legal standing of an adopted male heir in the Roman culture. So we're talking about a legal entitlement here. And we continue on from verse 6. "Because you are his sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit who calls out," just like this little girl who's calling out, "Mum, mum, mum," all day in our house right now. The Spirit who calls out, "Abba, Father." So you are no longer a slave, but God's child. And since you are his child, God has also made you an heir. You are legally entitled. You know, when my son Jude has a bad day and when he's not behaving well, he's not 50% my son or 20% my son. No matter how frustrated I am with him, he is always 100% my son. And you know what? I'm a flawed man. So even if I was to hamper him with my insecurities, and I was to treat him on a performance basis, as some fathers do or some mothers do, God is our perfect Father, and he would never do that to us. Sometimes at the kitchen table or putting my kids to bed, I'll say to them, you know, you're my son, you're my daughter, you're special to me. And sometimes, even with my own children, there seems to be a level of shame where they can't meet my eyes in that moment and where they can't accept that. But I want them to get to a stage of becoming their authentic selves where they can look me in the eye and accept that truth that, look, no matter what mistakes you made today, no matter how bad you did in a maths test or in a swimming race, or maybe no matter how ugly you feel compared to other kids at school, or whatever it is, you are still my son, you are still my daughter. It's like this with the prodigal son. The prodigal son, and we read about him in Luke 15, is really a man who can't accept this truth that he is a son and he lives under the blessings of his father. So he asks for his inheritance early and he takes it. And it's really, in a sense, a slap in the face to the father. He takes it, he squanders it, and he ends up in a bad situation, living in a pig pen, in a pigsty. And in doing this, he has tried to manufacture his own identity. But like all of us, when we try to do this, we always end up choosing something that is of lower quality than what our Father gives us. The prodigal son, as the name of the famous story suggests, returns, and he really returns humbly. And as he does so, his brother becomes jealous that his father has welcomed the son in, even though the son said that he would happily become a servant. The father welcomes him in and treats him like a son, doesn't treat him any differently, puts a ring on his finger. He is still an heir. Despite this, the prodigal son's brother becomes jealous and says, look, he's been out spending all of his inheritance on prostitutes, basically. And here's the father's response to the brother. He says, my son, because remember, even in this moment, the brother has to also remember his origins. My son, the father said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. When the father says your brother was dead and is now alive, this is a metaphor from Jesus to say, when you return to the Father, when you return to your origin, you move from death to life. You see, we live like the prodigal son. We live a counterfeit life when we choose our own identity. It's the inauthentic life. And it always ends up being a lower quality knockoff than what God had always intended for us. The counterfeit life might mean that you pretend to know something in a conversation that you don't actually know, so that you aren't caught out and made to look stupid. So instead of saying, I don't know what that means, you pretend to know. The counterfeit life is the inability to say, I made a mistake. And note, for the prodigal son, the real turning point for him, the moment of finding his origin, of finding his authenticity, was to say, I made a mistake. The counterfeit life is not speaking up when you have something to say because you're afraid of what people might say, or it's speaking when you don't really have a convicted opinion, but you just want to please people. The authentic you, on the other hand, is not false. It's not copied. It's genuine. It's real. It's authentic. It's having an origin supported by unquestionable evidence. The prodigal son found authenticity when he returned home and said, I'm hopeless. There's not one skill or act of bravery or piece of intelligence that I can offer here. It's being raw and vulnerable in front of the Father. And the Father here is, of course, a metaphor for God. And I want to tell you that 2020 is a great year to find your authenticity, to strip back the layers of falsehood on your life, to reacquaint yourself with the origins of where you've come from. Even in the West, we are challenged by COVID-19 as our luxuries get stripped away from us, and that is a good thing. In the church, as Christians, our normal habits have been stripped away from us. And the moment of challenge is something that God uses so that you can find the authentic you. In the Old Testament, there's a story of the Israelites being saved by God miraculously. God sends plagues so that the Egyptians release them. Not only do they release them, but they end up taking all the Egyptians' treasures with them. They get to the Red Sea. It looks terrible. God makes a way through the Red Sea for them. God provides food for them in the wilderness as they trek to the promised land. But the Israelites were not primarily being taken to a place, i.e. the promised land. They were primarily being taken into a relationship with God. And we know this because God allowed, despite his huge blessings for the Israelites, God allowed challenge to come upon them so that they could find their true identity. The passage from the Old Testament reads, "The whole community of Israelites left the desert of sin and traveled from place to place as the Lord commanded them. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water for the people to drink." Just remember here, they've been blessed massively by God, and yet God still leads them to a place where they are thirsty. They're in a desert. They can't see any wells. Without water, you die. God has still allowed this. So they complain to Moses by saying, "Give us water to drink." Moses said to them, "Why are you complaining to me? Why are you testing the Lord?" But the people were thirsty for water there. They complained to Moses and asked, "Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Was it to make us, our children, and our livestock die of thirst?" So Moses cried out to the Lord, "What should I do with these people? They're almost ready to stone me." The Lord answered Moses, Bring some of the leaders of Israel with you and go to where the people can see you. Take the staff you used to strike the Nile River. I'll be standing in front of you there by a rock at Mount Horeb. Strike the rock and the water will come out of it for the people to drink." Moses did this while the leaders of Israel watched him. He named that place Massah, which means testing, and Meribah, which means complaining, because the Israelites complained and because they tested the Lord, asking, "Is the Lord with us or not?" And it is interesting to note there that later on in Scripture, I believe it's in Deuteronomy, that it was, we're told that the Israelites were told, "Do not test the Lord like you tested them here." But the point I want to make out of all of this is that in that moment of challenge, the Israelites felt abandoned. Challenge had prompted them to question to whom they belonged. So much so that they actually wanted to run back into slavery, into Egypt. So they knew where they had come from, but they had forgotten to whom they belonged. And God allowed the testing, this trial, this challenge in their life to reveal that flaw in them, because they were not primarily being taken to a place which was the promised land. And yes, they were taken there and God wanted them there and he promised that. But first and foremost, they were taken into a relationship with God. Even when they were in Egypt, Moses' words to the Pharaoh were, "Let my people go so they can worship me in the desert." In Romans, in the New Testament, in Romans chapter 8, verses 14 to 15, it says this: "For those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship." And don't get caught up on the gender thing here about sonship and daughterhood. Sonship is used here as a metaphor to say that as men and women who follow God, we are heirs to his promises. Let me continue here. "The Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship, and by him we cry, Abba, Father." So as you progress through 2020, through a year of trials and disruption, maybe you've had hours cut back, maybe you've lost clients, maybe the old habits that you had in which life was very comfortable, even your spiritual life, even your relationship with God was comfortable because of the habits that you had, but those habits have been stripped away from you because of the disruption that society. God is cheering you on in this moment to find the authentic you, to find your real identity, and it always tracks back to him. Simplify your life. Remember, God's greatest command was to love him and love others. So if you find yourself minimizing your own wants and desires to serve others and to follow God, that's okay. You're moving towards your true origins. God bless, and Terry and I will hope to see you soon, and we'll keep you updated.